In this video, we're going to be talking about the 1963 classic Italian film 8½, directed by Federico Fellini. We're Coffee with Aliens at the Movies, a film education and review channel. I'm Robert Bellissimo. I'm an actor and acting teacher.
I'm Steve Chambers. I'm a writer and actor.
And if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to our channel. All right, so Steve, as we touched on last night, so much has been written about 8½, so much has been said from various directors and interviews, and
100%, man.
I'm curious, and most people focus on the visual style of Fellini, how inventive it was, and the fact that this director has writer's block and director's block, and this crisis, and so on and so forth. So is there anything that stands out to you that is about 8½, that is not discussed often enough?
All I have to offer is what it means to me. So you're right, like my first idea wasn't to talk about what it looked like actually. It was this. 8½, was the I don't even think filmmakers pretend that they weren't influenced by it. I think Woody Allen fully makes 8 versions of 8½. I think Manhattan, Stardust Memories,
Stardust Memories
of 8½. So I guess, I don't know. So the only unique take on it that I can say is the different meanings that it had to me at different times. And I don't think either of them are crazily out there. I think they probably were intended by the filmmaker. It's just the ones that stood out for me have changed as I've changed. And I really just see it now as like, and I don't mean it in a depressing way. I think it's still a great, kind of celebration of life. He keeps seeing youth and then him now. And I remember there were these parallels, visual parallels. And to me, that's a reflection of that's all behind me. And now here I am, but I don't know what's ahead of me. And I think we talk in this film a lot about time. There is a lot of past, present, but the unknown future.
Yeah.
And the unknown future can be whatever you make it to be, absolutely. But ultimately, what we all have in common is death.
Is suddenly this guy who was, I don't know, clearly like a Michael Bay kind of filmmaker who had made pure sci-fis or pure commercial films, and suddenly he's writing this script, again, another sci-fi, and he has these autobiographical aspects to it, which somehow he put in there. And then as he's approaching to face it, he can't face it because he can't face himself. So and that's where it works so beautifully with the flashbacks, with the memories start to haunt him of his strict parents, and he's at their cemetery and he's talking to them, and the great Sarina scene with the prostitute on the beach dancing, and then he gets reprimanded by the priests, and they hold a sign on him that says vergogna, which is like a meaning of disgrace. So they obviously that Catholic guilt, and there's a lot of signs towards you're gonna go to hell. The devil, the Sarina is the devil. So when you have this kind of upbringing, and really what stands out to me, and Claudia Cardinale, who's like this imaginary vision, this woman that he sees to answer the answer to his problems, tells him in the scene they have, well, you don't know how to love anybody. And that to me is what gets overlooked a lot about this. And I think that's where his true crisis comes from, is that he wasn't loved the right way. He looks for advice with it's interesting that a lot of the advice he seeks out is from priests and and the people who wouldn't help him at all, but he doesn't know who else to turn to. And they give him the answers that he doesn't like, and don't help him. He can't accept the way people feel for him. He rejects the love of his wife, and he cheats on her with this woman he also can't stand, but he's just sexually attracted to her. And as she's talking, he's reading his newspaper, like he's totally in his own head, which the film shows so well in terms of those great POV shots, where he's he's just going to these different parties and everyone's coming at him, and that music and you know, hey, and the ridiculous questions, you know, like, oh, could you make a work of art if the Pope asked you to, like that one journalist, and he's like, yeah, I'll think about it. You know, I just thought he's got no one to talk to, he's got no one to help him, and he doesn't, and everyone's just pressuring him for answers. The other thing, which is, it's such a mysterious film because,
yes,
you know, I don't how, like, it's a confusing film in a way. And it's interesting because it feels like, and like in the Hitchcock sense of the world, where like he's grabbing you by the throat and telling you exactly how to feel. But it's even though it's strikingly, the visuals are so striking and the cinematography is so I don't want to say obvious, but definitely a big part of the way this film is made is relies on these visuals. But it doesn't feel so much like, you know, okay, cry here, laugh here, be scared
right.
here. It's really the shots are, you know, the flashbacks, he has all these shadows, and the lighting is darker, and some things are brighter, some things are dark, and again, shadows, like looking back, the shadows behind you. And then when he sees Claudia Cardinale, everything's bright.
Right, that's right.
She's in white, there's white behind her. And I think they were doing that to highlight, okay, now you're in the past, now you're in his fantasy, now you're in his present. And I thought the cinematography was beautiful. You can see how that's influenced, you know, again, we go back to Coppola and Scorsese. You can see how much it influenced The Godfather with the dark lighting, with the shadows, and the POV shots. I mean, he's got these long stretches of POV shots, and I couldn't help but think of Goodfellas when Henry Hill is going into the bar and he's walking, and everyone turns to the camera and says, "Hey, Henry," and that was just like when he goes to the various parties and, hey, I got a script. Hey, you want to read this script? And, oh, what's my part about it? And everyone's just coming at him, constantly coming at him, and you can feel it too. It's almost like it's hitting you. And I don't know how he came up with ways to move he moves the camera in this eerie way. He kind of goes into their faces, he goes back, and it's not distracting. It just gives you a unsteady feeling.
Well, I think it's the thing we were talking about the other day, where, you know, in regards to good acting, it's when you see a movie and you go, oh man, did you see the performance that guy gave? It was amazing. Well, depending on your definition, sometimes that can be, well, then it didn't work because you're so hyper aware of it. Whereas like, you know, something subtle you don't notice, well, then they did their job. And so with cinematography and editing, I think, often, and I actually said this to you the other day, if you talk about the cuts and the camera work, well, it didn't work. Unless it's this movie. Apparent that with Fellini, not just in this film, I think certainly in La Dolce Vita too, but definitely in 8½, he's really, really, really making you successfully hyper aware.
Yeah.
That, yes, the camera's like the scene you're just talking about, where it got you out, like, how the hell did he do it? And then you also said it wasn't distracting, and it worked because he did it well.
That's the beauty of it. And I'm like, how
and that influenced every director. I think, well, you know, who knows? But like,
that's,
you know,
the mystery
people
of it.
talk about.
I think when you look at certain, like, you know, Hitchcock, there's a million books, and you can dissect. And I'm not taking anything away from Hitchcock, but you can dissect what he was doing and why and what the shots do. You can do that with 8½ to an extent, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I can see what he's doing, but why or how, and the mystery of it. Again, a lot of this is dreams.
It's because it's so personal too, right? Like, you know that, like, Hitchcock, is specifically doing like scientific, and I mean that in the best way, things to elicit a response with the use of lights, music, camera, everything is to, you're going to feel this now, like Psycho in the shower.
Yeah.
This guy, I think because this is so much more personal film, you can't know what everything means because it means something to him. 8½, though, I think there's so many things that are groundbreaking, the way the camera was in Citizen Kane or the car chase in Bullet was. There's so many things, but that still hold up. Like, they haven't been surpassed. Do you know what I mean? Like, instead of people building on it, people just use it. And case in point, you're exactly that. I think it's erroneously credited to Scorsese and Goodfellas, that Copa scene, the long shot, and they call it the Goodfellas shot. That's called the Goodfellas shot.
Right.
And Paul Thomas Anderson did that in Boogie Nights very well, when we go into the club and we meet all our characters.
Yeah.
And you've seen it, Swingers, Favreau, and Doug Liman did the same thing, and call it out. They're like, this is the Scorsese shot. But actually, it's the Fellini shot.
I always have found it, every time I watch it, I always find it scary. Like, I think it's like a borderline horror film. It's got like the scene where he's whipping the girls.
I agree.
When he's whipping the women, and that fantasy where, he's controlling any woman he ever slept with or went out with. And he bans that woman to the upstairs floor because now she's over 26 and she's, oh no, I'm still young. Like, it's like, what? It's like,
well,
it's
also,
it's gross. Like, it's kind of like, ugh.
It is, and I think you're right.
They could get away with that in the sense that, they're so upfront with whether they're, clearly there's a lot of misogyny in that film, but there's also a lot of worshiping of women, love of women.
Oh yes.
But yeah, everything that perhaps men view about women is just explodes, the good, the bad, and the ugly in that thing. And wow, I mean, I could watch it again and again and be baffled and confused.
I could watch that one many times. I think it feels kind of like a horror film because it is so confusing, because it keeps you kind of like, it's got that feeling of what's around that corner. Like, I don't know, there's an unsettling feeling in because the story isn't predictable. You don't know what's supposed to happen next, because even if you don't consciously know, somewhere in your body, if you've seen enough films, what structurally is supposed to happen after the big scary scene.
Ahead of it.
Like, exactly. And here you can't. And I think that's both in the kind of style of the script, but again, with the cinematography, is there's this feeling of mystery and uncertainty that pervades the whole thing. We're so eager, again, in American movies, and nothing wrong with that. That's my jam. But we want you to feel this way. We want you to be kind of comfortable, even in uncomfortable situations, right? Like an uncomfortable horror movie or whatever. Yeah, but it's got to be predictable for you. There's
a safety where you're outside of it to an extent.
And there's that.
Brings you right into
it. This brings you, yes. My last thought on 8.5 is, I think this has both. I think it's a film to be appreciated, but it is entertaining.
Oh yeah,
I absolutely think it's entertaining,
and it's got a lot of humor in it too. I mean, it's
tons,
and a lot of the neorealists had.
Oh, they weren't that funny.
Not funny, but there were always, even in Rome Open City, there are just a couple of moments of humor, and Fellini was great with that. Like, first thing that comes to mind is when he has to choose between who's going to play the old man in the movie, and he says, well, these guys aren't old enough. And the producer, look at this guy, he's about to drop dead.
Look at this guy. Yeah, exactly.
So if you are looking to see this, of course, it's on a lot of streamers.
Yes.
Canopy, Criterion Channel, YouTube has it. But our friends, of course, at Unobstructed View have it on both Blu-ray and DVD, and I'll drop those links in the description box below. And also at the end of November, the Criterion is releasing a box set of all.
I just saw that.
Fellini.
That's right. They just posted that. Yeah.
Fellini 100, because it's his 100th birthday this year.
Right.
And it's all his films. So there's going to be a new release of 8.5 in there as well. So I'm pretty jazzed about that.
Yeah.
So that's it for us. So thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing. And it's in the bottom right of the screen, the little subscribe button icon. And that's all. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.